Now, I've been the board president, so thank you very much. And I guess that's our defining issue of 2022, and I would like to think that we in the county handled that fairly well. We took it seriously. We tried to lead on the issue. We tried to use some common sense, and many of the things that we've done were adopted, including what we were helping the schools with was actually adopted statewide as the model. So I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of the fact that we opened our new jail during 2022, which was the biggest.
21.
21.
Wishful thinking.
Our biggest infrastructure project the county's ever undertook, and it turned out on time and under budget, like everything that we try to do around here does. And then finally, the tax holiday that we implemented last year, I think that again, wasn't just something that we did, it turned out to be a model for surrounding political subdivisions, and other people are following our lead. So all three of those things, were very memorable during 2021, and I think our board handled each one of those very, very well. So with that, we'll convene the annual organizational meeting. First issue is to appoint a president and a vice president.
And I have a resolution to appoint Tom Grossman as president of the Board of County Commissioners and Shannon Jones as vice president.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And there's a second, and yes, Mr. President.
All right, well, thank you very much. I also agree with Dave's comments. And while during the COVID period, other counties were cutting budgets, laying off people, furloughing people, we didn't do that. And our staff, all of the people that work for us did an exemplary job during this entire period. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm hopeful that our county, our state, and our nation will get through this period, and with the remaining issues involving the different variants that are coming out, that we will succeed in defeating this pandemic, and that our county, as well as our state and our country, will thrive both economically, socially, our families. I know that it's been a difficult period, but I believe that we will come safe through it. And I want to thank you for your giving me the honor of being the president over the next year. And Shannon, I'm not sure how often you've been in leadership with us here. I'm assuming you have. Twice.
I'm an old timer
Right,
now.
so,
I've been around a while.
So you're going to, exactly, I know, it's remarkable that you've been around for like 6 years now. All right, so thank you so much. Anybody else have any comments? No? Good. All right, then let's go to our agenda. And are we,
Do we have some resolutions on
yes,
that?
do we have general, do we need to do the
Well, for
general?
to
We've got a
establish our
couple more
commission meetings.
organizational
Okay, go ahead.
resolutions. To establish the meeting days and times for the Warren County Board of Commissioners, that would be Tuesdays at 9 a.m. and the second and fourth Thursday at 5.
So moved.
Yes?
Yes?
Okay. And designate the official representative and alternate for the purpose of voting at the annual meeting of the County Commissioners Association in Ohio. And that is typically the president, so that would be Tom. And then the alternate, no, oh, I'm sorry.
And this is at CCAO?
No, this is, Shannon is designated
Yeah.
as the official voting representative, and then the president of the board is designated as alternate.
That's good.
Yes,
So
Shannon's
moved.
on the board, so yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay,
I just saved you a meeting.
thank you. I appreciate that.
And then to approve appointments and various appointments, appointments and reappointments to various boards and committees, and you should, that was in your packet.
I'm fine with it. So moved.
And yes?
Yes?
Okay. And that's all I've got for the organizational meeting.
Okay, now we go to Clerk General.
So moved.
And yes?
And I do have one other resolution to approve the requisitions and authorize the county administrator to sign documents relative thereto. believe there was just one requisition on there.
And so moved.
And yes.
Okay. That's all I have.
All right, do we need to approve,
We did the first one now.
we finished the requisitions too? All right. Okay, then we're up with our work session.
Suzanne. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, good morning.
Morning.
Tim DeHart from AAA Wastewater in Franklin is here today. His company desires to apply for a grant from Ohio EPA. As you may recall, the companies are not allowed to apply directly to them, but they have to do it through the Solid Waste District. So he's here to tell you about the project and to request your permission to apply through the Solid Waste District. If we do proceed with this, I just wanted to let you know what that would require of the district. It would be very minimal work. He would prepare the application, but we would have to submit it. We would have to make sure that the project actually completed and he did what he said he would do, and then the funding would channel through the Solid Waste District. The project is a recycling project, and so it does line up with the general goals of the Solid Waste District. Would you like to hear about the project?
Sure. A few minutes? Okay. Good morning. My name is Tim DeHart, as she said. I'm president of AAA Wastewater. We recently rebranded last year, 2021, as AAA Pro Services to identify the services end of our business, but also AAA Wastewater will be the processing of the wastewater business. You might know us as cleaning septic tanks. I don't know, some of you might be our customers. I didn't have time to check. Shannon, yeah.
Used to be, I don't any longer, but
You don't have a septic tank any longer?
no.
Darn.
I've downsized.
Okay, well, good for that. But this year, we also celebrate 68 years of being in business. My dad created it in 1954. I'm very proud of that. He started cleaning septic tanks back then, bought a farm just north of where he grew up on Beale Road in Franklin, was land applying for years as a fertilizer on the fields, much before the EPA even started or any type of regulations. He met my mom while working in NCR in Dayton. They got together and created a mom and pop organization for many decades, hired a lot of people. Just a classic mom and pop. In the 1990s, they got into cleaning grease traps. Now, is anybody not familiar with the grease trap, what a grease trap is? Does everybody know? Yeah? Do you know where?
Yeah, at a restaurant.
Restaurants? Yeah. Yeah. So they're at restaurants to intercept the grease from going into the sewer system, right? So we know that there are grease traps not only at restaurants, but also in cinemas, nursing homes, hospitals, schools, colleges, bakeries, just about anything that has a commercial kitchen. Airports, grocery stores, we clean Dorothy Lane Market, if you're familiar with them. Anyone who eats out is impacted by a grease trap. And in fact, we know there are over 4,000 grease traps in Southwest Ohio, in the Dayton-Cincinnati region. So it's a lot of grease traps, right? When I took over the business in 2010, my mom had been diagnosed with ALS, and I came back from living in Peru. And when we started, we had about 50 accounts. And when we process our wastewater on our farm, we operated a 243-acre farm. And the material was considered organic matter, so we can mix it in with the sewage, and it didn't make a big impact. Fast forward to 2022, and we now have over 500 accounts. We've really grown this area of the business, and we get calls coming in weekly, if not daily, of wanting us to clean more grease traps. This is growing because two competitors in our region have stopped cleaning them because of it not having an area to offload it and also being very costly to offload it, of dispose of the grease trap waste. Currently, we are bringing in 1 million gallons of this material. That's a lot of grease strip waste. And the EPA no longer wants what they call fats, oils, and greases, or FOGs, to be land applied as part of the land application process. So we had to do something different. We have to do something different. It's become a huge disposal problem in the region and nationwide. When the fogs get washed down the drains, they clog up the sewer systems and also create headaches and backups for wastewater treatment plants. In fact, treatment plants usually don't want to take them. They don't want to have to deal with it, and they only do it because they have to. So in our region, Butler County only takes from Butler County. Cincinnati Metropolitan Sewer District only takes from the Cincinnati market. So nowhere in Montgomery County, Greene County, Clinton County, Warren County takes grease trap waste. It's a problem.
So you're going to tell us what you do with that?
Sorry?
You're going to tell us what you do with that?
I am, yes. So over the years, I've looked at what can we do with it, right? And the biggest answer is an anaerobic digester, and probably you've heard of those type of things. But the challenge with those is they're very costly. They're over $1 million easily, if not multi-million dollars. And then it's also, it doesn't allow, it's very costly and it just it wouldn't work for us. You have to have the right feedstock in it for it to work. And if you don't have the right feedstock, then it's shot. The digester won't work. So what we've been doing in this process of working with the EPA, we're taking the material to Kobe, which is the anaerobic digester in Columbus, which is very costly, fuel, labor, and not sustainable financially for me. So we've got to look for something else. So in the past year, I took a hard look, and I found this operation and flew down to New Orleans to check it out. It's called Greasezilla. It's a turnkey fog recycling program. The machine processes the grease trap waste, separates out the brown oil, sends the oil back to the operation to use its own fuel, and then sends the rest of the oil to a tank to be sold as a reusable fuel. So it's very exciting. Now they're selling the brown grease as a reusable fuel at $2 a gallon to the port in Cleveland. So it's a local to us operation. So that creates a revenue stream of selling the oil at the same time of that. So I have bought into the system because at the right time. It's starting to take off. 20 systems are being installed nationwide at major treatment plant systems in Los Angeles, Massachusetts, Long Island, since I originally got connected. Multi-billion-dollar operations are starting to take notice of the system and get involved because they see it as a great alternative. What is really great about it is it mitigates taking the grease trap waste to landfills and creating unwanted gases and wasting perfectly good sources of oil. It's cutting-edge technology that is coming right here to Warren County. And until now, there has been no way to easily address the fog system. It's cost-effective, completely reusable product. In places where water is scarce out in the West, they reuse the water to be produced in supporting the ecosystems. We plan, because I know you'll ask, we plan to put it back into our sewage system as that part of that process until we find a better use. It also creates a circular economy system where we use, collect, and recycle all the materials right here locally. I have bought into the standard system that will process up to 2 truckloads a day. With the grant, my intention is to add another tank that will not only double the processing, but triple the capacity because the system will be continuously operating and pulling out the oil. This will give me the opportunity to grow other service providers who will be able to come to us, and we'll charge a tipping fee for them to offload the grease trap system to us, which will create another revenue source. The tank will cost approximately $200,000, and the Greasezilla company is willing to extend me a line of credit so that, because they too see the potential in the Dayton-Cincinnati region. And I will also have exclusive rights to this system in the market. So it's very exciting. My plan is to be a showcase for private owner-operator types, much like I visited New Orleans. They want to send people to see us here in Warren County. They like the fact that we're nimble, we're a small organization, but we do a lot with what we do. And I'm also a returned Peace Corps volunteer, so I'm fluent in Spanish, so that creates another market for us as well. And and we're also working on cutting-edge material, recycling material for the sewage as well. I'm in contact with some people that are doing that as well. I truly believe we have a win-win-win here for the community, for our business, for the environment, for Warren County, and I very much appreciate your support in this grant. And I also would like to support if you have any other ideas of how we can grow the business in a Warren County homegrown business.
Well, thank
Any
you
questions?
very much. Yes, so where is your operation?
We're in Franklin Township, right off of Beale Road, 5 minutes off the highway. There's a 243-acre farm back there in between. If you're familiar with Clear Creek Park, and now what's it called, Hazel Woods?
Hazelwood Park.
We're right between those parts, right next to Spring Roll,
Great.
right back in that
Well,
operation.
thank you for what you do. It's very, very important.
And so does this project, I mean, obviously you're here, so it's been investigated at some level, I guess. It meets the terms of the grant.
It does. It does. The expansion of it. We had to go ahead and get involved in it, but the expansion of it is what they came back. I was able to solicit questions direct from the grant administrator, and she came back with the answers,
Okay.
just the other day.
He's
Okay.
been in contact with Ohio.
Okay, so because it's an expansion of an existing recycling project, that it became eligible for the grant, and the Ohio EPA has confirmed that it's eligible project.
Yes.
Okay.
And then from our standpoint, do we need to support the grant request?
Yes, there's a resolution in the packet if you want to approve it to allow us to apply on behalf of AAA.
May I say something? Has this business plan been reviewed by Mr. Broush? What I thought I heard this gentleman say is that once it reaches a stage where, until there's some other option, that you would be discharging the treated fog into a public wastewater system. Did I misunderstand that?
Yes.
Okay. This would be in the Franklin Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant vicinity, which Mr. Broush is a board member. And I know nothing about this. I'm just raising this issue because once upon a time, we had a situation in this county where the Board of County Commissioners were asked to approve a grant for some piece of equipment on a business in Union Township called Marvin's Organic Gardens. And at that time, we were looking at it with blinders on, that it was just a grant and nothing else. It turned out to have some very adverse consequences in this county. It ended up in litigation because of the activities that were taking place on that property. I just want to make sure that there's no unforeseen consequence by you doing this. And I would think that input from Mr. Broush, it would have been nice if he could have been here, if he could review it and have some comment to you, whether he had any concern or not.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask about the suit, because I take it the process cleans the water adequately enough to be sold in other areas. You said something about it's a revenue source, that it actually can be
Speak of the devil.
sold in areas where water is scarce.
Right, right. I don't know if they sell it or they use it. We do not have a water issue here like compared to other states, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
But your process, your output water is clean enough to be dispersed into a public sewer system? That's the question.
I don't know because we're not connected to a sewer system. We are not connected with the city of Franklin or.
But didn't you say, yeah, I was actually going down that path of part of this process, you filter out, and then there's an oil that you can resell for fuel,
Correct.
things like that, and then
Correct.
part of the output of the process is water.
Right, correct.
And that water, does it meet the same, because we don't take every drop of water, you
Right.
can't put into a public sanitary sewer system.
Correct.
So is the output of the water okay to put into a public sanitary sewer? I would assume that the manufacturer would know, but you're already doing this, right?
Right, yeah, so it would go back into our land application process. So we would connect it.
Well, what did you say about the water goes into the public sewer? You said that during the,
No, I said the fogs. That's causing a problem with, fogs are causing problems in all kinds of sewer systems in the country. Like right now, Greene County is really cracking down on grease traps because fogs are
right,
getting.
untreated
infested.
fog definitely
Yeah,
does.
yeah.
I thought, and it sounds like our prosecutor thought, you
Yes.
said the same thing, that you said during this process, the byproducts are water, or I'm sorry, oil that people use, and then also a water, and you would think
Right.
that there's water, and that water is just going to be put into the public sewer system.
In some places, not in our case. Because in our case, we're not connected to a public sewer system, so we would put it in our land application process.
Well, is there any byproduct of this particular machinery or equipment that you're gonna purchase through the grant that goes into our public wastewater treatment plant?
No.
Okay, so the answer is that the products that come out of this are resold. and/or are applied by you by putting it on soil, or?
Correct.
That's it?
Yeah, and we have an NPDES permit through the Ohio EPA to do that, so.
And are there any, the Marvin's Organic Gardens was quite the
Yeah.
debacle. So is there any smell or any
No.
impact to surrounding property owners?
No, there is not, and that's the big difference between an anaerobic digester, because Fairborn is dealing with the Dovetail project, and, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with that in Fairborn. It's an anaerobic digester, and the neighbors are saying that it smells. Marvin's Gardens, I've met Marvin, I know the situation. This is not he was composting. This is not composting. This is a process, a machine that's very contained in a frac tank. I don't know if you're familiar with frac tanks. They're like containers, but for liquids. It's gonna be processed within our garage. There will be no odors. It's gonna be very simple system, turnkey.
Okay, so it has no impact upon our wastewater treatment system at all?
No,
No connection to it?
no connection. We're not even connected to the city sewer. I mean, that would be great if we could do that, but that's a whole nother ballgame.
Chris, anything else we should be asking?
No, I'm with the water and sewer department, so, you know, I think we would be concerned about receiving anything from the operation. We're not interested in taking additional septic hauling from your company at all. So that's one thing that we would be concerned about. But it sounds like, I came in late on this conversation. It sounds like what you're asking for doesn't have anything to do with the water and sewer department. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right. That would be our number one concern.
I would recommend that in your application, you somehow make some affirmation, if it has to be in there, that the end product in no way will be discharged into any public sewer system, and that you intend to apply 100% of it to land application system.
Okay.
Because in the Marvin's case, even though, yes, it was a compost, but it's very similar in that early on there was an application by Marvin through the Board of County Commissioners under this same process to be able to get a grant to buy a piece of machinery that cost $250,000 or more. And then ultimately, when we had problems from a zoning perspective, public health perspective, one of their defenses in my litigation was that the Board of County Commissioners had acquiesced to this by virtue of being the applicant on an application for the equipment purchase to create the compost facility which resulted in the noxious odors and so forth that were a violation of our zoning code. So learning from our past experiences, if we could get some affirmation that that's not going to be an issue, you're not going to do that. The other question I would have would be to Adam, who is here, because we had a case that went, and I'll let Adam speak up. Your particular land use is a conditional use that you obtained through the Board of Zoning Appeals. Were there any conditions that would have to be altered or modified or might be in jeopardy by virtue of this new process?
My case was with Septec, who I believe is a client of AAA. I think.
That's my brother.
Okay, it's your brother. So that conditional use was with the brother's company, who's close to the same area, and was taking its septic waste to AAA for processing for land application. So I don't know about AAA if they have a conditional use or what the case would be, and it would be within Franklin zoning, Franklin having its own zoning code. So, I mean, maybe you could, Franklin Township. So, so that's right, Franklin Township, which is county zoning. So I don't know if you could speak to that, if you have any zoning permits, or if you're just considered to be agricultural, or with all your land application.
As far as I know, we've always been considered to be agriculture. When I checked 10 years ago, we were considered agriculture and grandfathered in, because we've been there since the 50s.
And that's common, I think, with waste being, having land application. Case law normally says, well, that's agricultural because it's sustaining that farm, and you have over 200 acres probably. And I don't know if this fog processing would change
But
that
you're already
analysis.
doing this.
Correct.
Yeah, you've already met all the EPA requirements.
Correct.
And so, in the Marvin's case, we basically teed it up to where he had a higher level of class application to do higher level stuff, than higher intensity, I guess, than what he was actually doing. And we basically teed it up to where he could do this higher intensity stuff by helping him get this machine. And before we knew it, we had dead cow carcasses, right next to a neighborhood and things like that. So it was not a good situation.
Right.
We just basically enabled him to do something else, but nothing you're representing to us is changing anything other than what you're doing right now. You can
Correct.
just do more of it.
Correct.
And you're not planning on expanding, doing a different process, doing anything else other than what you're doing, just
Correct.
more volume of that.
Correct. That's
Which
correct.
should be fine, I would think. If it's allowable use, it's here. He's just putting more of the stuff on his land, and he's not connecting up to the
Now,
sewer. or anything like that.
now, to be clear, we are shipping our product to Kobe in Columbus, and we offload in Butler County when we're in Butler County, and we offload in MSD in Cincinnati. We may need to do that because of the sheer volume that we bring in, right? But we're not doing anything else beyond that, if that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, I think I understand. I mean, I've got no problem with that caveat in the application, making it clear that council said that essentially you're not going to be changing anything in your process. You're not planning on using any of the public sanitary sewer infrastructure at all.
Correct.
All right, any further discussion about this? Do we have a motion?
We do. Have to authorize the Warren County Solid Waste District to submit a 2022 market development grant to the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency on behalf of AAA Wastewater.
Any other comments? I'll make that motion.
Second.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right,
And
Chris.
before you've got no problems with Ohio EPA, you've got nothing outstanding, anything like that,
No,
right?
we have a few little issues that we're dealing with them and the way we're changing things, but it's nothing major.
Okay.
And we're in constant contact with them, first name basis.
Sure.
All right, Chris, you're up.
You don't have anything? Oh, we do, he's not on.
He's on the agenda.
Yeah, he's on the agenda.
Oh, when I saw him.
Tom.
Okay.
Yes.
This is, you had some questions, I think, about
Yeah,
this
he's
particular
Behind number
subject.
4.
This is the Morrow.
Yeah, okay.
Good morning.
Before we go there, if I might interrupt, I apologize. Why don't you send that resolution over to me and let me tweak it? You approved it by title only.
Do you want me to give him the one out of the master?
The one you just approved related to the application, so I can put some language in it that we discussed and
Okay.
that we reserve the right, we're not acquiescing to anything other than an application for a grant.
Okay, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, so I did have some questions about this because there was an administrator from Morrow who had some issues.
Oh,
that
sure.
you had contact with. So is this the topic that you're talking about?
Yeah, actually, I think in your
There's a
packet there,
Resolution in your
Right.
packet behind number 4.
Right.
yes, there was probably a resolution in your packet that talked about authorizing the Water and Sewer Department to proceed forward with the demolition of a property at 100 Hazen Avenue in Morrow. This is a piece of property that the county purchased towards the end of last year. As you recall, we are currently doing a study in Morrow to try to figure out how to convey the wastewater flow out of Morrow down to our treatment plant at Lower Little Miami. And as part of one of the results of that study indicated that we will likely need to expand our main pump station in Morrow, and possibly incorporate putting in a holding tank in Morrow also. And so the property that the county purchased late last year, that we purchased, the commissioners purchased, is adjacent to our existing pump station in Morrow. And so there is an older structure at that location. It's a house that has been abandoned for the last 2 or 3 years, and it's in extreme disrepair, and it's not inhabitable at all. There's no service, there's no electrical service to the house, there's no water service to the house. And so the resolution that is in your packet this morning authorizes us to proceed forward with the demolition of the property. So it's, you know, the property is an eyesore. It's probably a risk to public health. You know, it does need to come down. So we've started obtaining price quotes for the demolition, and we've also had an environmental inspection done on the property, and the inspection identified a small amount of asbestos that needs to be abated before we tear it down. So we're in the process of having that asbestos removed, and then once that's removed, we would like to proceed forward with the demolition of the property. We would take the property house down to the ground level, and then what we would do is we would restore the property and just restore it to grade and plant grass there. And then that property would be mowed by our crews and kept in a decent manner. So that's what our request is, to demo the property.
And what are we using it for?
It's our plan is in the future, you know, a couple years down the road, you know, we will go back to that property and expand and either put a pump station there or a holding tank. So it's our property that we have right now where our pump station is just too small.
So
you
it's
know.
adjacent to one of our existing
It is
facilities.
adjacent to our existing pump
I
station.
remember this conversation now. We had this conversation because it was an opportunity with this abandoned building that you didn't anticipate the expansion right away, but it was this opportunity.
Yes.
And that this was, yeah, I remember this.
So the property came up for sale. You know, we noticed the property back in the fall, and we contacted the real estate agent, and the real estate agent had indicated the owner of the property had plans for the property. He had plans on putting, I think it was 4 condos on the small lots. And it just so happened that the market pricing and everything, the cost of those condo units was just way too high to make it affordable. And so that's where the owner of the property decided to abandon his plans for making improvements on the property and put it up on the market. That's when we saw it, and then we went ahead and proceeded to buy it. So I know it's probably not consistent with maybe what the village truly was hoping to happen, but we do need that property to provide sewer service to the village. So in reality, it is, you know, expanding onto this property, putting the pump station there, will benefit the village because it will solve a problem, potentially help us solve the problems we
How
have
big is it?
in the village. The property is, it's maybe an acre at the most?
Less than half acre.
Half acre?
Five,
Yeah.
4, 5, 5.
I was thinking if it, you know, now if you're doing the demolition and grading and all that stuff, now's the time to do some mounding around it. That if you're trying, you know, if it's visible in the village, that, you know, do you raise a 3 or 4 foot mound kind of around the perimeter, put some trees around it,
Yeah.
try to screen it?
So, it is a small piece of property, so it's kind of hard to do that mounding now. In reality, you know, what's going to happen is the house is going to come down, and we'll take down the small fencing that's there, and our crews will mow and maintain it. So it'll just be an open green lot on the corner. It'll look nice.
But then eventually, when you put something there, then we can just screen it with pine trees or
Yeah,
whatever around it
yeah.
at the time.
So if we need to put an equalization tank, our concept of that is probably a tank that would be potentially below grade, so that it would not be an eyesore. But, you know, if it's a pump station, the pump station, there'll be a small building there with you know, not a huge building, but, you know, but most of that lot will probably end up being a green space.
All right, but we authorized last year that you purchase this property, which you then subsequently did. Now, the only purpose of this resolution is to authorize your demolition of the structure that I guess is dilapidated and has a problem, to remediate it and demolish it. Then I raised an issue, or actually, an issue was raised with me, a question about the Morrow Village Administrator having contact with you about the usage of this property, or perhaps doing what you wanted to do on another piece of property. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And I realize that what we're doing today does not decide that question. But is there something that we should know about, or that we should ask you to look into with regard to the request of the Morrow Village Administrator to use a different piece of property for your purposes?
Sure. So I did meet with the Morrow Administrator, and I walked a piece of property that she suggested I take a look at. The property was, I don't know, a quarter mile down the road. So then I took that request and I sent it to our engineering firm, who we're under contract with, and asked them to take a look at that property to see if that property would serve our needs. And the engineering firm came back and said, no, it does not meet our needs nearly as well as the property at 100 Hazen. And that's why we proceeded forward to buy that property. So there was several issues with that property that the administrator proposed. So it was in the floodplain, it was close to the Todd's Fork Creek, it was going to be subject to flooding. The cost, we'd have to run another quarter mile worth of sewer lines back to that property, so the cost for developing that property would be significantly higher. The size of our storage tank would have to be smaller because the depths of the sewers aren't quite nearly as deep as where we're at in Hazen. So there are several factors that made that property not nearly as appealing as the property at Hazen. And that's why we proceeded forward with buying it at Hazen.
So why were they proposing, or why was she proposing this alternative site? Did she have an interest in that property? But they were talking about giving it to us, is that right?
I did not talk to them about compensation or about pricing or anything like that.
Would compensation make a difference?
I think there was probably a legal issue with that property, and the fact that I think the property was owned by maybe somebody in Morrow that I think.
There was a problem because the person who was suggesting that he look at this alternative site, the person that contacted you, is the owner of that property.
I know that, right. And so that's why I was in part asking the question, because was the fact that it's both the owner, and also was the owner offering it for free, though?
I did not talk to them about compensation. That issue did not come up. There appeared to be a conflict of interest with that property, potential conflict of interest.
And was that your opinion too, Bruce?
I was very concerned when I learned that, but Mr. Broush had shared with me what he just shared with you, that it wasn't a property that was recommended, so it was a non-issue.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
So I believe you have a resolution in your packet.
Right.
To authorize the demolition and removal of the building and contents at 100 Hazen Avenue in the Village of Morrow.
So moved.
Yes?
Yes.
Mr. Broush, my only question, are you and Mr. Russell going to coordinate all year?
We will. Thanks.
I thought that exact same thing.
We called me earlier today.
Awesome.
May I follow up on that, unless you have something else?
No, go right ahead.
Good segue. I have a voicemail message from that village administrator that has nothing to do with the property at 100 Hazen Avenue. It has to do with the St. Zachary's Haven property, and she has contacted me making inquiry as to what has transpired through current date, because I suppose the owner that came before you asking for sewer on St. Zachary's Haven has reached out to the village to discuss the issue of annexation. And so the last time this came before you, there wasn't any decision made. We just heard from her and her son, and their attorney was here, but he didn't say anything. And I was left with the impression that there wasn't any action to be taken. But before I called her back, I just wanted to verify that, I mean, I don't know of them planning to be asked to be on your agenda anymore. You really just didn't take any action was where it was left at.
The conversation was whether you were gonna change the boundaries.
Yeah,
And you had Brent Centers from Hamilton Township here.
Said no.
And I believe the board said no, they weren't while they supported her 100% in her mission, that they were not interested in, changing the boundary of the one sewer area. I don't know that we specifically talked about the Village of Morrow sewer area, which is Rochester, Cazaddale sewer area, which I think would be a conversation should annexation occur, because I believe that boundary is set based upon the village's boundaries. Chris can follow up on that.
Yeah, so, the question comes up is when the Village of Morrow, when they annex and expand their boundaries, are we obligated to provide sewer service to that expansion? And that's a decision that the commissioners the board would need to make. It is our recommendation that we not be obligated to serve whatever Morrow decides to annex. This issue came up, it's a significant issue. It came up right around 1990 when the village annexed the Woodlands of Morrow. And they approved, their planning commission approved 900 homes in the Woodlands of Morrow. And at that time, the county sanitary engineer responded back to the Village of Morrow and said, we do not have capacity for 900 homes for the Woodlands of Morrow. And we cannot serve all these homes. If anything, we may be able to serve 500 homes. And this is part of the issue we're having now in Morrow, is that we don't have capacity to serve all the homes that are committed down there.
Yeah, but my recollection around this conversation, and Bruce, you'll remember better than I, was there was no objection by there was a desire to want to figure out a way to move forward with this particular project, but that the limiting factor was that we had no way to be able to put them into the service boundary without opening up, completely changing that service boundary, which the township was very clear they did not want to happen. So if the village annex this particular property in, notwithstanding the legitimate issues you speak of, and I hear you, does it not provide the opportunity for this one property to be allowed in without opening the door to other properties, since would all be contiguous and within the village's boundary?
It would put us at risk if we were trying to or have limited the subdivision that Chris just mentioned, where we previously didn't have. Do we no longer have capacity? Reniker's letter would have been written at a time. I assume this goes to Lower Little Miami, or does it?
It's not an issue with Lower Little Miami. That's not the issue at all. It's
It's
the
a
issue
collection.
of conveyance issue.
Okay,
It's
so
the
it's a
issue of
collections
getting
issue.
flow out of Morrow.
Okay.
Our station is not designed to handle that
So
flow.
this is
Okay,
this is an altogether different issue than the one that was contemplated in the fall when we had this conversation.
It's a different sewer improvement area is what Tiffany's pointing out. These two kind of abut each
Right.
other.
So
and then
that the
you-
challenges then are different. So the previous conversation, the challenge was there was no way to encapsulate this property without touching all of these other properties that would then create a problem in that sewer district. In this instance, while it is a different sewer area, this one is already at over capacity.
Well,
In
both.
terms of
both-
transmission.
Both of them are at capacity. I just want to make sure that you're clear that we don't want to set a precedent that by approving something at this property, you're setting a precedent that then therefore we have to approve anything else that comes in and wants to be annexed in tomorrow. You know, I think what you're
Well, I guess
referencing
maybe
is a
that's the
case-by-case
question I'm
basis.
asking. Does that really set a precedent? If that's what exists today, is the boundary, does it set a precedent?
I think that if they annex, you would have to evaluate that on its own merits, and depending on how they try to annex it, you may not have a lot of choice. You may have to just approve the annexation. Then if they want to make application to get into the system, sewer departments, it sounds like, may say to them, well, we don't have the capacity for that because of the collection system just won't handle any more. So that's another issue. And let me remind you of something I think I reminded you when they presented here last, and I keep coming back to this over and over and over, and that is, this doesn't prevent them from doing their project. They still have the option of doing an on-site system, which costs basically, at least what I recall, about the same as if they did public sewer. The distinction they made was if they had to do an on-site system, it's going to require them to take in extra land, and they won't be able to have some pond that they wanted the residents to be able to fish in, and that related to the memory of her son who loved to fish. So that was what's driving this from this developer standpoint, that they want this pond, and if they could reduce their pond or do without a pond, they can do an on-site system. So it's not like you saying, no, can't help you again. Like you said previously, no, we can't help you, thwarts them from being able to do this project. It doesn't. It maybe not optimally like they want it to be done, but it doesn't prevent them from carrying out the mission. It's just that the mission won't have a little bit of fishing in it.
But it's a good question, a 30,000-foot question. We have a sewer boundary, a sewer improvement area related to a township right now. You have another political subdivision that comes in and annexes. We then have a contract of some sort with that political subdivision saying, we're going to be your service provider. We will give sewers to everywhere that the village is, or the city, or whatever the case may be. So that city or township or or that village or city expands new boundaries that don't coincide with our service area. Are we obligated to provide sewer to that? And then does that in any way affect our other boundaries?
You're not obligated. The statute actually has really two components to it. One component is if you modify the boundary, you have to do it based on public health and welfare. I didn't say general welfare, I just said welfare. Then the statute goes on to talk about the Board of County Commissioners deciding where to expand the lines and other apparatus, so the collection system. And that part of the statute is very clear. If it doesn't apply to the whole statute, it definitely applies to that, and it says in the board's discretion. It's your sole and absolute discretion whether to do that or not. And here, even though they may legally with OKI become the supposedly the provider, they can't provide it. They have to contract with us to provide it.
Unless they wanted to go build their own system, then they could.
Yeah, and they can't do that, I'm sure.
So the fact, do we have an agreement, if the property were annexed in to, do we have an agreement with that particular jurisdiction that requires us? I think you're saying that we don't have to supply.
We don't have to. No, we have an agreement, right, with Morrow?
No, I don't recall ever seeing an agreement regarding service area. We have multiple agreements with Mara, but it's usually dealing with billing and and utility billing services. But there's no agreement that I'm aware of that deals specifically with sewer service and boundaries. You know, it is.
If Morrow were to annex this property and becomes part of Morrow, do we provide sewer services to all of Morrow?
Currently we provide sewer service to, I believe, the whole extent of Morrow.
Okay, why?
I think that's the boundaries that we have established currently,
Well, when we
is
es-
that, I think our service boundary currently is consistent with probably the boundary of Morrow.
Is that just by happenstance, or is there a reason? In other words, did we at some point draw the boundaries to include all of Morrow? Is that what you're telling me? And it has nothing to do with us having some separate agreement with Morrow saying we're gonna provide you with sewer services,
So-
whatever your boundaries are.
So the only annexation that I'm aware of that has occurred in the last 15 years was the Woodlands of Morrow.
Yeah, that's, the answer, you're right on point here. The problem becomes that if Morrow wants to expand its boundary by adding additional territory, which this subdivision they added 15 years ago, and because they did that, and we had been providing sewer in this particular sewer improvement area to the boundaries of the village, and they're expanding it, and it was such a massive expansion given the size of Morrow, Mr. Reniker, Chris's predecessor, wrote a letter and said, look, we don't have the capacity to do that. You can do whatever you want to. You can accept the annexation, and obviously the Board of Commissioners had approved the annexation on the merits of the annexation standalone, not sewer. And then Mr. Reniker had put them on notice in writing that, look, you can do what you want to, you can give it whatever density you want to, like a small village gave them the density they wanted to get this massive number of lots. We can't treat that. That's the problem.
And their
So,
alternative is they can go form their own sewer district, correct? I mean, build their own plant. They can do it themselves. I mean, cities do that all the time.
They
Yeah, but
could, or
this
they
is-
could develop it with on-site systems.
Correct. My point is that we're not limiting the expansion of a city or a village.
No.
But it is 100% in our discretion, regardless of what they do, we have our own discretion on, do we expand our service area, or do we put lines in there to serve that? They can annex whatever they want, doesn't mean they have access to sewers.
I think that's the question.
And I believe I did at one point see a resolution that actually set the boundaries of the Morrow Cazaddale Sewer Improvement Area, which did, and I think Chris Weinich actually worked on that. Maybe Adam remembers that conversation when St. Zachary's first came up.
That was, you're talking about Morrow Cazaddale, which is Saddlebrook and
Yes,
Classic
and
Way,
it takes
which is a
in-
separate
Yes, it's a
sewer
sep-
service area.
That's correct.
What you're talking about is what we're talking about here is Morrow Rochester area,
I'm
which
sorry,
dates
Morrow
back to.
Rochester. That's, I'm sorry, yes.
That dates back to, I want to say, the early 1990s.
That's correct, but it does set the boundaries that are, that incorporate the village of Morrow and outside of the village of Morrow.
Bottom line is this, however, my takeaway from this conversation is that an annexation into Morrow does not bring with it the requirement of our sewer service department, you, to provide sewer services.
correct.
In fact, that has been denied previously.
Correct. Another example of that was we went through this same issue when you had issues involving Peters Cartridge. And South Lebanon was annexing all the way down the bike trail to the Monkey Bar. And the question became, okay, you can annex as far as you want, but how are you going to provide sewer? And we ended up working out a contract with the village of South Lebanon where we would be the provider of sewer because they could not provide it.
All right,
So we've been down this road.
right. So the answer to the question is, we're not obligated to do it. There's no contract requiring us to do it. And in fact, in the past, we have not always done it. Okay.
I think Bruce just wanted to raise it.
Yep.
Yeah,
Was that the
I want to call this village administrator back and I don't know what she's going to ask me. She may ask me a lot of questions, and this is obviously a relevant discussion to that.
Okay.
Very good.
Chris, is there anything else?
Next. No, no.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The only thing that I want to mention, maybe for next week, if the board could bring forward any planned vacations or those kind of things so that we can get them on the calendar, so that Tina and Laura can schedule appropriately the things, just to be aware of, I know Shannon has a few big trips, and Dave usually has big trips, and Tom usually goes somewhere in the summertime, or, so if you could do that, look at your calendars and bring those next week, that would be very helpful to us.
Can I ask a question? Is it possible for us to have a brief conversation on an executive session on, threatened litigation? Is that possible today, Chris?
What threatened litigation?
I'm talking about the Stotler project, the Stotler 2
Penny,
project.
or,
Right.
I'm going to say no, because the original letter that was sent to us, we replied to, and they replied at your request to the Hamilton Township, and at this point, no one has asked you in any kind of follow-up, I guess, if we heard from them. And I'm expecting to hear from them very soon, so this may become imminent again. But in light of the fact that things developed, which I shared with you, Commissioner Grossman and Jones, status report on that project as it had gone through Planning Commission. I haven't heard anything else after Joe Trout's reply letter to the township's law director's letter, so I haven't heard anything.
All right, so there would be no basis for us to
Yeah,
have
I
a
don't
discussion
think
about it at this time?
There's anything imminent about it right now.
Right, so we couldn't hold an executive session.
Correct.
And the reason why I'm raising it is because of the fact that there's been some request for some alternative dispute resolution that's non-binding in our participation in that.
Yeah, I thought we discussed and said no.
yeah, I don't think,
I wasn't present.
you weren't present, but I think
Okay.
Commissioner Young and Commissioner Jones and Bruce did provide that response that we were not interested at that point in time in mediation.
Okay.
But, and then I heard nothing else. So they've gone dead silent on us. And I just thought maybe they were working their plan through Planning Commission to see where that went, and that did not go favorable to the developer on both of the land projects, or both different parcels, but part of the same project. And that was in December, and I still haven't heard anything, but their time hasn't expired to file any kind of administrative appeal.
Okay, so the only reason why I was making a suggestion on this was because I wasn't there for the conversation that you last had, and I was curious, and I know that you've already made a decision about that, which has been communicated, and I didn't want to have this conversation outside of executive session because I wasn't involved, so I wanted to understand it, that's all.
Either commissioner could tell you, or I could tell you.
Well, after the meeting is over, you come on back and you fill me in.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
I have nothing else.
Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Yes?
Thank you, yes.